Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Sasquatch Outpost podcast, episode 6. And I'm excited about tonight. I've got Scott Carpenter back, who we were supposed to have the first week, and we'll talk about that with Scott, about what happened, that he couldn't make it that evening. But I'm excited about tonight. If you haven't subscribed, please do, and hit the bell so that you get updates on the podcast. We're part of the Untold radio network, and all of our 10 podcasts combined, we're trying to up our subscribers. So if you would subscribe, that would be wonderful, and give us a thumbs up. I've been working on the new video room, as I've talked about most weeks, and it's coming along. It's going to be like a cave, and I think I've sprayed on there 48 cans at least of spray foam to try and build the walls, and hopefully I'm not going to lose brain cells in the process, because that stuff isn't great for you to inhale. I know that. This weekend I'm going to go out for some squatching. I'm going to go camping with my good friend Jason, Frank, and a couple other people. And it's still a lot of snow. It's going to be cold. And when you squatch this time of year in Colorado, there's some challenges that come, one of which is finding enough space without snow to pitch your tent. I think I'm going to take a tent, not my sleeping bag this time. Not my sleeping bag, my hammock. I often sleep in a hammock when I'm out squatching, but with temperatures like we're going to have right now, I think I'm going to take a tent. But I've been out before when we had to dig a hole in the snow to put a tent on the ground and then dig a hole for a fire. Hopefully that's not going to be that much snow, but I've got a little video here. Also, my friend and staff member, Stephanie Cantu, is going to be moderating and helping me with some of the video footage here. But I wanted to show you this video I took a couple of years ago. I was going out about this time of year, maybe a little earlier, with some friends. And I was driving in my truck, and we got onto this road. And you can't tell from the video, but the road is going up at a probably 12 to 15 degree angle. It was a steep road, and you'll see, it's just a brief video, but you'll see what I'm talking about, extreme squatching. So you can throw that one up, Steph.
Put a winch on the front of that thing.
Yeah.
Winch. This is the part of the adventure nobody ever thinks about.
I know.
Getting there.
I couldn't slow down from the top. If I slowed down and got stuck, we were done.
Come on.
I honestly thought we weren't going to make it, and that was the truck I had. I've now bought a beast. It's a Dodge Power Wagon, and it'll take me anywhere I need to go. And I'm going to get some pretty extreme decals put on it pretty soon here, just because I can, and it's advertising for the Sasquatch Outpost. So, but also there's a conference coming up in May. I wanted to show you guys that I'll be speaking at in Cripple Creek, Colorado. If you live in Colorado and you're interested in one of these three topics, you can throw that one up, Stephanie. So it's kind of hard to see. It's called the Pikes Peak Paranormal Conference, and it's going to be held in Cripple Creek, which is mostly known for gambling. But there's a high school there that they're going to use for this conference. So it's on UFOs, Bigfoot, and ghosts. And so obviously I'll be talking about Bigfoot. I'm not into ghosts. I've told many people, thanks, Dave. You can take that down. You can look up the website, Pikes Peak Paranormal Conference, if you're interested. But I've told a number of people over the years, I'll go out in the woods at night. No worries. I'll go out. I'll look for Sasquatch in the middle of the night. Do not ask me to go into a haunted house and do an investigation. I am not into spirits and things that go bump in the night inside houses. So that's not me. I got buddies who do that. More power to them. Not for me. So anyway, I'll be speaking about Bigfoot, obviously, and it should be a great conference. It's kind of gone viral. This thing is taken off. Well, without further ado, I'm going to bring in Scott. So, Steph, you can bring Scott on to the screen. Hey, Scott, good to see you.
Hey, guys, good to see you.
Hey, I'm excited to have you back. I know some of the folks who came in late at the first show didn't know what was going on and why you weren't there. Can you tell us what happened?
Sure. Our little dog, my girlfriend, she's had the dog for Sadie for 13, almost 14 years. And literally, we just finished supper, and she came down the hallway and started having seizures. And had I would assume what you would consider a stroke. And within just about 10 minutes, she passed.
Wow. And
it was just, out of the blue. There wasn't any, she was an old dog, but you know what I'm saying? She was healthy, and as far as we could tell, there weren't any signs. She just passed.
Wow.
Of course, she, went quick, and, but
and that was like an hour before the show or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, literally an hour before the show. It's just like, so apologies for that, but
No, we all understood, and I gave your apologies, but obviously that's a family crisis, and you have to be there for your family. So that was not a problem at all. But I'm glad we could get you tonight, and you're a busy man, so I appreciate you giving us an hour or so of your time. And
no problem.
I got to know Scott the first time when he came to the first conference that I organized with Dave Paulides and Dennis Full, called the Mile High Mystery Conference, and we were holding it in Denver that year, and Scott came as a speaker, and we got to know one another, and we've kind of been friends and stayed in touch a little bit since then. And I need to have you come to Colorado again, Scott, and just speak for the Sasquatch Outpost. That would be great.
Yeah, I'd love to do that again.
Yeah, and you and I go out in the woods and do some squatching together.
Yeah. Sounds
good. Tell our listeners just about yourself, where you come from, and what you do, and before we get into our topic.
Sure. Well, I'm live here in East Tennessee in a little town called Maryville. It's about 30 miles outside the national park, and I still have a regular job. Unfortunately, I'm a systems administrator, operation manager for a small software company, and
Okay.
they do cloud software now. And I take care of all the computers and all that good stuff, and Azure in the cloud, and that's got a degree in computer science, and that's on the professional side there. I'm just a fella. Hobbies. I like everybody else. I hunt and I fish,
Sure.
hike, camp, everything else, and about 15 years ago now, I guess it's hard to say that 15 years ago. Had an encounter near on a local lake, and then that led me into starting my research, and that led to meeting David Pilates, which led to the North American Bigfoot search, which led to the DNA study, and
Yep.
from there, it kind of just took off as far as that goes.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of that. Before, I want to ask you about that first sighting, but tell us about the books that you've got published. I know that people are interested.
Well, yeah, I've got several. I mean, I will hold them up.
Yeah, why don't you do that? That'd be great.
My oldest book, and my first book was just really a field journal called the Bigfoot Field Journal, and it was more just, basically what I did is it was just a journal of all my notes and pictures, and then a few years ago I wrote the Nephilim Among Us, and of course I've got an updated version, and that is about Sasquatch and other mysterious cryptids that I've encountered, and it kind of goes through my reasoning, coming to the conclusion that what Sasquatch was, and and I kind of lay out my case. And then actually at the conference, I got so many questions about the Sasquatch DNA study. Me and Dave were actually talking, and he's like, you ought to write a book. And I said, yeah, I know, because I mean, literally, everybody at the conference, it was just over and over again. That's all they want to talk about was the DNA study and what happened with the DNA study, et cetera, et cetera. So I ended up writing Truth Denied. And this is probably my most researched, book. And it's, I'm very proud of it because it's got, as they say, I've got the receipts of this guy. And from the Wayback Machine. And it takes you through the Sasquatch genome study, at least my involvement in it. And it's kind of like that study from, my perspective.
Sure.
I had 11 samples in the study, and I did work with David, and I had some contact with Melba and some other, and helped acquire other samples from other researchers. And so it was just kind of, the whole thing from start to finish, and from my perspective, what happened. And, we can get into that later, but it was just, one of the, it was just one of those episodes, in this big world, Bigfoot, that is still controversial. And a lot of people just don't know what happened, what the results were, and all the craziness that was going on in the background. And then my current book and my current things that I'm doing is called the Sasquatch Awareness Project. And basically, I'm not doing really doing a lot of Sasquatch, what you call the traditional Sasquatch research. I'm kind of like, we've got the DNA study, done all we can do. They're kind of hard. They're not really going to let you, do a traditional study and it's very difficult to form any relationship or get any data like that. And so, there was a great need for help. And even back in the early, when I first started with the North American Bigfoot search, a healthy percentage of people were just asking for help. Hey, I've got Sasquatch on my property. What do I do? The police won't come out. The police won't come out. Nobody will do anything. And so that just kind of, and that, that continued on. And so I kind of got, my mission now is to help people. This book.
You get a lot of calls about that?
Yeah, calls. I mean, it's mostly emails or questions like that. My number's not published, thank goodness. We
don't want our numbers out there.
No, but the Sasquatch Awareness Project is basically is it's about 110 pages. It's very concise. It's kind of like what is a Sasquatch for, and how to handle, and what to do, for someone who's had that encounter and is freaked out, having issues there, or people are having issues with Sasquatch on their farm or even coming to their house. And, it's kind of try to do something short and concise. It's kind of like a little handbook of what do I do, if I've had an encounter. And it's also a book you could give someone, that it really doesn't know much about Sasquatch, but they're an outdoorsman, and they could run into it, so you want to educate them. And so that's kind of my mission, is to educate people on the existence of Sasquatch, and give them practical solutions to problems that arise when you have to deal with the Sasquatch, or when you have an encounter. I mean, a lot of PTSD, a lot of people have issues there. Is pretty prevalent, and I think the sightings are on the rise. So
no, it seems like that. And backing up for a second to the genome study that you were part of, and that came about early on in my own career as a researcher. So I learned about that through, I'm trying to remember where I heard about the first time, Dennis probably. But one thing I would love to do, because so many people don't know, I mean, I've never even heard of that project. If I could pull it off, and I'm curious if you'd be interested, if I could get on one show, you and David and Melba and Adrian and Dennis on one show to talk about everything that happened with that. It would be like a 2-hour show, talk about the project and everything, so that people can hear it from the people who did it, who were involved in it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to hear that, because I've never been able to. I never talked to Adrian before, so everything I got, from that history is secondhand, or through Dave or
Right.
Melba, or whoever. I never directly talked to him. He was more, he was running the Kentucky, or he was, the Adrian project, his project, and Erickson project, and they were up in Kentucky. And I think Dennis spent time at the Kentucky location.
Dennis did. He was on and off there for 5 years, and as was Sibylla. Sibylla was there for a while, but before Sibylla was, I'm having a mind blank out here.
It was owned by that couple, and I can't think.
It was owned by a couple named Roger and Sissy, but Adrian ended up buying that house from them, so that they could have access whenever they wanted to the property. But I would love to get Melba on that show as well, and just find out. So I'm going to do my best to try and pull that off. It'll probably be down the road a little ways, just because of the people that are involved and how busy they are. But that's something I would love to do and been thinking about. Hey, let's go back to your first encounter. What happened that got you going?
Sure. I'll try to keep it short, because I always say I'm going to keep it short, and then 30 minutes later.
We're here just to hear you, Scott. So I
know, but I want to keep it short, because usually I tell the first two encounters, and then the show's over. And so I can get long-winded. So long story short, or short story long. Or short story long. I was fishing on a lake here in East Tennessee called Tellico Lake, and I was fishing off of like a recreation area. It's about 1,500 acres. It's a multi-use deal, but it's horseback or walk-in only. No motorized vehicles.
Okay.
So I was fishing, and I made some half-hearted whoops that I'd heard on a YouTube video, just being, silly. And it was early morning, and the sun hadn't been up long, and it was like, I think it was like May or June, so it was warm. It was, the sound carried for miles. And so I'd made this, and it was a bad whoop anyway. And I, it's just silly.
Beginner
And
look.
it was just a silly thing. Sometimes you just get a wild hair and you do something silly.
Sure.
And so I kept fishing. Well, I started hearing something coming through the woods, coming in my direction. And it was, whatever it was tearing up Jack. It was like, I tell people, it's like someone had a small bobcat.
Huh.
What those are, and just going through the woods and not trying to miss anything. So I was limb breaking and heavy footfalls, and it was just like in the movie Jurassic Park, when when Tyrannosaurus Rex is coming, but you don't see him yet, but he's just tearing everything up. I mean, it was pretty close to that loud, and it just keeps getting closer and closer. And I stopped fishing, and I'm just kind of like, what in the world? Because I'm trying to figure out
on the shore.
Yeah, it's coming down. I'm in a boat fishing. I'm about, good. Anybody bass fishes, I'm a good cast, maybe just a little bit long, off the bank. What is that? I don't know, 25, 30 yards.
Yeah.
And it's coming, it's a point of land. So it's coming to the end of the point. And the point's covered in briars and honeysuckle. And, it's a mat, and trees and fallen trees. It's just a mess. And this thing's, coming. And I'm thinking, well, nobody'd be stupid enough to ride their horse down in there. I mean,
yeah,
they break its leg. And then, this thing came, and like the sun was coming up to my right. So we had, you had those long shadows. And so you had the woods were dark, and then you had the sun penetrating just enough. And every now and then I would see something, pass, back and forth. And it was kind of stomping and going. Once it got down to the shoreline, it kind of started going around that point, just like it was looking for something. And then I noticed I drifted just a little bit too close to the bank, so I hit the trolling motor, which it's electric, so it makes. When I did, it made the whirling noise, and that's when it spotted me, and it stopped. Even though I couldn't see it, I mean, about all I every now and then I'd see a patch of black, and I couldn't tell. Obviously it was large, but I couldn't tell how tall. But then after it heard me and it stopped, it's kind of like it realized, whatever it thought I was, I wasn't. And it made some like exasperating. It was like I'll try to make the noise. It's like a and so it made 2 or 3 of those, and then just slowly turned, and just normal, like bipedally, just walked back up in the woods. Wouldn't tear anything up anymore. And so that was my first adult encounter, and it was just, I was just in shock. I didn't know what in the world, I'm like, what in the world, what is this? And so the next weekend, I fished, and it just, it's one of those things that bugs you. You get the bug, I'm trying to figure out what in the world is going on here, because I, know it wasn't a bear, and I know, this was just crazy. And so, that kind of started me off, and I grabbed my, hiking stuff and a camera. And the next weekend I went out and started looking around, and, started finding, one thing led to another. I went back into that same place, and sure enough, it looked like you'd taken there's just a pathway of destruction all the way down that point. Of course, I didn't find any footprints, but boy, it was just tore up from ground level all the way up to about 12, 15 feet was just trash. It just looked like
it was coming through loud because you were there.
Yeah. Well, I think, what I think now is the whoops were, it sounded like it, either another Sasquatch from their clan or some sort of challenge or something.
Yeah.
And then he was coming to figure out what was going on, because obviously he didn't recognize the vocalization. And it must have been good enough to fool him. Most time they were pretty good, but either he was far enough away or whatever. But my Providence interceded to make it sound good enough that he thought he was going to come check it out and was going to be let everybody know he was coming.
Yeah, I've heard several stories over the years about them doing that, coming through, just smashing and crashing. And my wife, when she had her encounter, this thing was coming down the hillside, just making all kinds of racket. People, when we're walking down the hillside, we don't do that. We don't break every branch on the way down. I mean, some people might, but most of us are pretty quiet when we hike.
Yeah.
So anytime you hear especially big tree snaps, crack, because it takes some strength to do that.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, it's like you can hear the smaller trees, like you can hear it bend and then you can hear it snap. It's creaking and then bam.
Yeah.
And it's obvious something's, pushing or twisting. It's crazy.
I mean, my first encounter, we were walking out of an area about 10:30 at night, and behind us, one of them, I'm assuming it was a Sasquatch, grabbed a big old tree branch and just broke it off. And it sounded like a gunshot, and it was so dead quiet up to that point. It scared me to death. And I about jumped out of my skin but since then I've realized they do that a lot. They'll break stuff just so we know they're around, I think.
Yeah.
So are you not going out like you had in years past as often?
Well, what I'm doing is I'm just doing my normal thing. I'm back. I hike. Basically, I still wear the back trail camera.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I ought to explain that.
Yeah, explain that, because I'm curious about how you got that idea, and I'm not sure. I think you were the first one that I heard that from.
Trying to see if I got the rig in here somewhere. One of these things, I organized and I can't find anything. You know how that is, right?
At least you're organized.
I organized and I lost it all.
Organization is like.
But so basically, when I first started doing Sasquatch research, I was just, at the time I was just holding had like a 480p handy cam.
Yeah.
And I would just hold it. And I was bent over, and I established the feeding station where you give them gifts and they eat, and you try to get pictures of them and stuff. And when I got back and I reviewed my footage, I noticed why I had the camera underneath my belly pointing back to the left, almost, like quartered behind me. There was a Sasquatch stuck his head out, was just kind of doing the, staring thing out of the thick foliage. And I kind of started realizing, they're peeking, they're hiding, they're behind me, they're, stepping out to look. So I thought, at that point, I thought, how can I, what can I do? So I literally just had a piece of foam, and I would take one of the handy cams and I would strap it, and it would be facing behind me, and just taking pictures behind me all the time, because they hide and they peek out. And so that's how I got
Have you ever seen anyone else do that up to that point?
Not until then. I was the only one. Everybody else was still doing the forward, or you had people that would take the sets of pictures and stuff. But no,
I think you've got a lot of imitators now all around the country.
Yeah, well, that's fine. That's, to me, that's the way to go, because they're behind you, they're peeking behind you, and it's just a pain, because it's like I still got 1,000 hours of video I haven't watched, and because when I used to go out, I'd have two cameras going all the time. I had a monopod with one camera, and and it was always, I learned the hard way. You never turn the camera off. If you're doing Sasquatch research and you're serious about it, a lot of people, SD cards are cheap now. So, and you can get a 1080p camera. And if you want to spend the money, you can get, the 4Ks, but you should always have a camera going, always, because you're going to catch the sound or the glimpse. And like I said, always have a back trail. And what I do is I have a gimbal set now, and I use a GoPro. Hang on, I'm going to turn my back. No, bad form here. I should have had this ready before, and I didn't think. Okay, hang on.
So do you use like a DJI gimbal or?
Yeah, well, I use here it is. Well, in the strap. Well, see now. Hang on, almost there. Now the new GoPros have like I've got the latest one. Was it the 11? It's got its lens has stabilization built in it, and it's
Okay.
pretty good. It's pretty good. But the older GoPros, see, this is the rig here, and it basically is it's a gimbal that keeps everything level. And you put your GoPro in. I can't turn it on without a camera in it. But this little strap I found, and it's made for a camera, and you just strap it like that, and then it just films behind me the whole
What do you
time.
attach it to when it's strapped?
My backpack.
Backpack. Okay.
Yeah, because I always have a backpack on, so it just velcros to the backpack, and then I just reach up here. I usually instead of setting it to do it, I usually just go ahead and about every 10 minutes stop and restart, so I get smaller clips. But anytime I'm hiking, or sometimes when I'm hunting, even when I'm hunting, like when I'm going in and coming out, I'll have it going. But so I'll go for a hike, be up 2 or 3 hours, and I'll just back trail the whole time.
I never thought about stopping and starting it so you have smaller files. That's a great idea because
Well, one of the bad things about the GoPros will do that. They'll break them up, but you lose when it does the break. It's kind of screwy the way it does it, and so it's easier for me. It's just easier to stop and start it. I don't lose any, because you usually lose a couple 3 seconds.
Well, we've got a couple of these videos that you sent me of your back trail video, and how about we throw one of those up and you can tell us what we're looking at.
Sure. All right, so that's a back trail of a portal. And
a portal.
Yeah, it's a portal. This has got a lot of play lately. If you get a chance, can you pause it? Or can you? Okay. And I don't have a way to point stuff out, but right in the center, there's this glowing thing, this silvery shimmering thing. It's some sort of entity, and it's beginning to materialize. And then if without a pointer, it's hard, but you can start to see a round bubble starts to form, and inside the bubble, it's kind of blurry. But the edge, it'll get a very hard edge as I go farther away from it.
Okay. Right in the middle?
Yeah, right in the center of the trail. Like right there, stop it again. Right there, you can see, right in the center of the trail, you can see the circle beginning to form pretty hard.
Oh, looks like the vegetation is kind of going into a circular form.
Yeah, well, it's actually looks like you got a round bubble of water, and then right straight center of there's some sort of entity beginning to materialize right in the center of that bubble. I don't know, it may be kind of hard to see without a pointer and me pointing it out. As I get further away, it's kneeling down on its knees, and its arms are on the ground. I don't know if you see that or not.
Like right in the middle of the trail?
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, it's easier if I have a pointer and I can show you. Once you see it, it's like, oh, okay, I got it. But of course, I've been looking at it for a long time.
Yeah, you've been looking at it for a long time.
Some people look at it and they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. You're crazy. And then other people are, oh, yeah, I see that. But
I probably have to look at it several times. Is that the only time that you've seen something that you would attribute to being a portal?
I have one. I got one more about a few years after that. There were two entities. One looked like a Sasquatch, and another one had what they call a Darrow that were kind of like out of focus.
So let's put up this one is interesting. So
this is another one on the back trail. This is 1080p. This is looped. In other words, as you can see there, all I'm doing is just looping this back and forth.
Okay.
Sasquatch
So he's picking his head up on the right hand side.
Yeah, he's right. My shoulders are swinging, so he's going basically as my shoulders swung back. He went down. So I'm just looping it where he's going down and coming up. And that Sasquatch there, went back and did the measurements, and based on his head, it's over 14 inches. He would be about 12 foot tall.
Really?
Yeah, he's pretty good size.
And he was he white?
He's white.
Wow, kind of hard to hide when you're white, huh?
Yeah, well, they do it. There's several in East Tennessee here. There's several white ones. There's Greg Graddick and I've seen one and taken reports, and I've had a couple other reports from Great Smoky Mountains of white Sasquatch.
So I can see two eyes. I can see what looks like a nose. There's something on the right under his left side. Are those is that his hand or?
Yeah, he's got like two fingers up there on the foliage, and then he just leans over. This whole thing, I slowed that down and stabilized it. The whole encounter lasted about 2 seconds. That's all you get. At regular speed, it lasted 2 seconds. It's kind of like I'm walking away and my shoulders swing and he's nothing there. My shoulders swing back, and it's kind of like he's like, ooh, he realizes he got caught. So, I don't have a gimbal at this time, so this is just shaking, and it's just, just mounted on the back of my shoulder, but he goes down real quick, realizes I'm there.
Did you ever see him in other times?
I didn't have a clue that he was there. Now I've got a trail cam video of him. You just could just see the white top of his head. He's peeking at the trail camera.
So basically, he's standing behind something that's pretty tall. Then, if he's
he's basically going down.
Okay.
There's a little piece of the video I didn't put in there because it's all stretched out. Basically, as I start to turn my shoulders and I'm moving downhill and away from him, he sees me and he drops down. Huh. If you've ever seen a video of that's 30 frames a second, so it's not like it's high speed frame. So he's all stretched out for a second, and then he comes, he's obviously moving down, and then when he stops, of course, then for just a few frames here. Sorry, I'm pointing at the screen. I know people can't see.
Yeah.
But once he gets down in the kneeling position, he's there. That's, like I said, that's about 4 or 5 foot of brush, and then he's kneeling, but then he goes down.
And when you were regularly going out, what would that look like? What would you typically do?
Normally I had different areas that basically I just was the bait. I'd wear the bait. I'd wear the back trail camera. I'd go out. I had feeding stations, and where I'd leave candy bars and stuff. And I had some trail. Basically, in the Smokies, I had found an area. It was a pinch area. It was a funnel, and I started finding footprints, a lot of footprints, and a lot of activity. And so, didn't have a lot of money at that time, and the trail camera technology was horrid, but I scraped together as much as I could and bought I think I bought 7 trail cameras, and I made a camera fence, watching the camera, And then I thought I was smart before I realized how intelligent they were, and I kind of left a little gap, and then had my best camera in that gap, thinking they would try to sneak
You
through.
can
And
fool them, yeah.
no, they didn't, but that, I mean, they would run them down. They did all kinds of crazy things to them. They'd run them down the tree. They'd stand in front of them so close it was just a big whiteout. I did get a couple of decent videos. The one time one of them licked the camera.
I remember that, yeah.
Uh,
How high was that camera up?
That camera was about 9 to 10 foot off the ground.
And
I
remember his face was right level with the camera.
That's exactly right. I would take like those the steps, you'd screw in.
Yeah.
So I'd take one of those and I would, put it in a couple of feet up and screw it in, and then I'd stand on it and reach up. So that, that put it somewhere between 9 and 10 foot off the ground. Because I wanted to get them really high where the bears couldn't smell them. And then, I'd angle them down towards the ground just a little bit. And back then I camouflaged them and did the whole 9 yards. But, I mean, there was times like I would use Christmas tree. I'd take an old Christmas tree and cut it. And so, because I was in a forest with a lot of pine trees, and I would, put those, I'd screw those into I had metal cases because I made my own metal cases, for the bears. And so I had them in those metal cases, and I'd camouflage those cases. Well, they would take, you could move those Christmas trees are made of wire, right? Well, like I would go back, and where they would take they would like push the limbs over the lens of the camera where they could take pictures. I mean, they knew exactly what was going on. Yeah. Or they just run them down the tree, because I would use what I'd chain them to the tree, or have a cable and a lock, but I'd use bungee cords to keep the camera against the tree real good. I didn't want to use screws in the national park, and they would just run it down. Sometimes they'd run it down the tree. Sometimes they'd flip it over. They'd literally just flip it over where the camera, the backside was out, and they just did all kinds of stuff like that. But, we were doing hair traps for a while there, trying to get the DNA samples, and our hair traps. Dave worked with me about this. We had to pull the hair out, so we were putting packing tape around backwards on the trees.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
And using food. And then in this one location where they were messing with the cameras, there was what I called a peaking tree, and they used to like to set one of the cameras off, and then they'd sit back, and they could see the infrared, and they could see the throw of the infrared light, and so they would just kind of lean in just a little bit, and so you'd get a few frames of their faces, or a little bit of eye shine, and then they'd lean back. Well, I noticed that they were doing this in two trees. It made like a Y, and they were looking between the two trees. And so that's where I put the tape, and I got a really good sample.
Huh.
I think I got them in the short hairs, because I found the tape was ripped off the tree and thrown quite a few yards away.
They were onto you.
Basically when this one stepped back, it hurt. I'm sure it did. Because there was a big tuft. That's probably, I don't know. I got a picture of my book. There was a large tuft of that fine black hair.
Huh. Hey, we're gonna take just a quick 1 minute break, and Stephanie, let's just play that promo for the super chat videos, and we'll come back.
Show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
So, if y'all want to be a part of the show and contribute a little bit extra, we would appreciate it, and we'll always acknowledge that. And thank you, Terry, for that super sticker. In your opinion, do they know what a camera is, Scott?
Oh, yeah.
In
my opinion, they're extremely intelligent. I think they're much more aware of situationally aware of us, and and what we're doing, what we're trying to do, and I think they're aware of their place as far as how society considers them, and I think they take full advantage of that.
I used to think in my early days, I don't know about you, I used to think I could sneak up on a Sasquatch, and I thought if I was quiet enough, they wouldn't hear me coming, or I could fool them by camouflaging the camera or something. Man, they figure it out every time.
No, yeah, I mean they know the moment you hit the woods.
Yeah,
and usually all the places I go have lookouts, and I mean, like there's the parking lot up in the Smokies. They watch the parking lot, and lots of times I'll pull in, you can hear the wood knock or the whistle. They'll determine before the day starts what their signal's going to be for that day. And so, I mean, it's been anything from, like I said, one time it'll be a wood knock, next time it'll be a little whoop. You might hear a faint whistle. You might hear a barred owl that just didn't sound right. And, usually matches the number of people coming up the trail. The call does.
They're saying, "Oh, here he comes."
Yeah. Well, it's just not me. The trail I like to, I like to, if you want to find them, it's not hard. It really not. Of course, warning, I wouldn't go looking for them because you could have a bunch of unintended consequences. But if you're going to go out, I mean, David, had written in his first book, the Hooper Project, it was horses, children, water, women, and so I found a trail that had all that. And it didn't take long to start, because it was like, this trail is like TV for them.
Yeah.
Because it's women and children and a lot, perfume, and you can walk up this trail and you can tell when ladies going up it, because it just, it just reeks of perfume.
And that kind of lingers. It kind of stays in the air for a long time.
Yeah. And so they would, and it's in a steep like gully, or there's this creek and an old road bed, and then it's straight up and down on both sides for a long ways. And so they just it's laurel thickets. So they just hide and watch. And so that's kind of how I got started in the Smokies. It's doing that. And then, it wasn't hard. Once you learn what to look for, it's not hard to find, in my opinion. It's not hard to find. But, I mean, they leave markers and signs that are pretty obvious. It's not hard to locate where they're at. And so, and like I said, I got fortunate that they would screw around with my trail cameras for a little while. But once it's kind of like, once the curiosity's over, that's it. It just dry. Any activity around them can totally dries up.
So, Sasquatch obviously was a focal point of your research, but I know for a fact you had some encounters with things other than Sasquatch. Can you tell us about some of that?
Sure. Unfortunately, that was one of the unintended consequences I try to warn people about, because other things start showing up, and it's inevitable, I think. And if you do this long enough, then you're going to have some strange things happen, and the dog man was one of the strange things. I mean, we were right in the middle of the DNA study, and I was doing the back trail camera stuff, and one of them, and if you're familiar with my channel, I've got the dog man footage. I've got more than one, but I've got one really good one where he's behind me, and kind of like he's got his head back, kind of levels his head out for just a second or two, and kind of weaves and bobs because he doesn't know what I'm going to do. And then when I turn my shoulders, he sinks down. And
he was close, if I remember that.
Yeah, he was about 4 or 5 feet behind me.
Yeah.
And you could see his nostrils. You can see him breathing. You can see his nostrils. I've done a little study where you can see his nostrils moving. There's different subspecies of them. This one's what they call a flathead. I mean, it had a wide flat head and a shorter snout, and it was like a pig on the end.
Did it have the erect ears?
It had one. It was missing one ear.
Huh.
It had only one ear on the right side, and then it had this little entity thing that was stuck hanging on to it.
Yeah, I remember that. That was really weird.
Crazy. It's an imp, or the locals call them apple sprites, and so they're little entities that like to hang out in apple trees and squeak and throw apples at people. That's what that's what the people down there in Madisonville said. So, but that's what I had a local tell me that's what it was, that's what they call them down there.
Apples,
and so,
right. Interesting.
Yeah, and but it was right in the middle of the study, and I showed Dave, and he's like, "Oh, that's great. It was a Sasquatch." Because back then, that was before the craze, the Dogman craze had really taken off.
Yeah.
Now it's all about Dogman. It's all Dogman this, Dogman that. And, Beast of Bray Road and Land Between the Lakes and all that, and the encounters people have been having, it's acceptable. Back then, Dave's like, look, we're having hard enough time with all the attacks. He said, we roll that out and people are, it'll just be mad. And so I kind of had to hold that footage until after the study got,
sure.
got published.
You had to be careful when you talked about what.
Yeah, and we didn't talk about all the other crazy stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
I was having issues with orbs and they were following me home and UFO craziness and then, other paranormal stuff started happening. So, but you just didn't, don't talk about that. They'll think we're all crazy.
Yeah.
It wasn't that we, other people weren't experiencing. It's just, what they used to call the woo, everybody just used to be quiet about that. But, if you're a true researcher, you got to follow it you follow the trail wherever it goes. And
that's what I don't get. People that have been doing this for 30 years and still say they've never had any encounters or any weird things happen. I'm thinking, I don't know how that's possible.
I think they just ignore them. Maybe. Or they happen and they're just not going to admit it. I mean, some people we know that have big names, Finding Bigfoot show, they finally did a woo show.
Huh.
And Bobo talked about seeing orbs and the lights and seeing, and so they finally broke down and did show where they did talk about, I think, orbs and lights in the sky. I think that was the two main things they talked about. But at least they
Bobo's pretty open about that stuff now. I don't know that Cliff or Matt are as much, but you have to, it just happens. Like you say, you follow the evidence where it takes you. You're not inventing it. We're not inventing stuff.
Yeah.
But as it happens, you follow it and say, okay, where is this taking me? And
well, what is it they're doing?
What is it? Yeah.
Yeah. And how are they doing? You try to figure out how, I think I don't think it's magic. I think it's just the abilities, and they have an understanding, I think, of the ether, how to use electromagnetic and how to things and frequencies, how to use infrasound. I think all that's in play, and I think they just have a greater understanding of it.
Yeah, I had Ron Moorhead on a few weeks ago, and he said for a long time he never talked about all that stuff, even though it was happening. They had it happen in their camp, but he just thought people won't. It's crazy enough talking about Bigfoot, let alone talking about lights in the camp and orbs and all the rest of that. So.
Yeah, and then when I went and did the mortal sin and linked them, to what I thought were the Nephilim of the Bible, that people just lost their minds. They're like, it's like, you'll be all right, you'll survive.
Well, tell us about. I've just got to plug my computer in here before I go dead. Tell us about your thinking about the Nephilim.
Sure.
You're kind of famous for that, if I could use that term.
Yeah. Well,
tell us about what your thinking is about that.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I went there is, I was, when I wrote the book, I was looking at all the evidence, and I'm Christian, so I'm going to look at this stuff through my lens, through my worldview. And so I'm seeing the Sasquatch start, and I'm experiencing these things. Or it's the, following me home. It's the infrasound. It's the lost time. It's the, the fight or flight thing. I have like 2 or 3, 4, maybe 4 times where I had missing time. Now I've got the video camera run. I've got the video camera running.
Uh-huh.
In other words, I don't remember what happened. I
Oh.
mean, it's the strangest thing to have something happen. But when you look at the video, you're like, you don't remember. There was one time where I had it was obviously a sighting of Bigfoot was sneering at me, and I was trying to focus in on it. And then I inexplicably stopped filming, turn around, and walk off.
And you don't remember?
And I don't remember it. And then, but when I went back and watched it, you could see there's a Sasquatch there. And I call it the sneering. He's kind of sneering at me, and he's kind of out of focus. I'm trying to focus on him. I'm trying to in and out, and it's like and when I went back and broke the sound down from my camera, the camera I had at the time would record infrasound, or which and it would show up, and so I was being hit with some infrasound.
Wow.
So whatever it was, whether you want to say it's infrasound or some other technology, the ability they had, I turned and just walked away. So I started, these sort of things started happening, and I was looking for, logical explanations for them. Started doing research, and the DNA study, of course, for people that don't know what, the brass tacks of DNA study found that they're a human hybrid, and what that means is the mitochondrial DNA, which comes from the female, a woman, that was human. And the nuclear DNA, which comes from the father, that was unknown, still unknown. And it was very exotic. It had DNA. Basically, the DNA was structured in such a way that when someone who knew what they were looking at took a look at it, the sequences, it shouldn't be alive. In other words, they were so exotic, single strand, double strand, and certain genes were either missing or corrupted. And it's like, scientists will look at it and say, if this was a human baby, it would have died in gestation. Yet you're trying to tell me you have a blood sample from this thing. And they're like, at that point, they're like, no, can't believe it. And, and even Dr. Ketchum talked about, and she did it in the study, but she talked, it looked like it had been, their DNA had definitely been manipulated, and it was very strange, and it was odd, and it's kind of like, this thing shouldn't be alive, but it is. So I started looking at all that, and then there was I had some dealings here at the house, and there's other people as well. I mean, for me, this is what put me over the top, because basically, I got to do a real quick definition of what a Nephilim is in the Bible in Genesis 6 and the book of Enoch. The fallen angels mated with human women, and that human angel hybrid were called the Nephilim, which means to the earthbound or to fall. That's what the fall means, the fallen ones. And so, of course, the first generation were giants, but that continued on, and then after the flood, there were Nephilim tribes all around in the Promised Land, and there's about 24. Some were known for being giants, it's 30, 40 foot tall. Others were long necks. Some had dog heads. Some lion men. There's all kinds of genetic craziness going on. And so, my theory was, or what I came to think, is that the Sasquatch are the descendants of the Nephilim.
Okay. Well, there's a question here. I'm curious to know what your thought.
Yeah, they can be demonic.
Do you think they're demons or demonic?
Well, by definition, if you're a Nephilim, you're not human. Your soul's not human. In other words, it's not a God-breathed soul. That was the great sin, that these angels did, because they weren't supposed to procreate, because it would cause this deal. It would cause you wouldn't have a human soul. It would, it would be a soul, but it would, not be God sanctioned. So I think they're definitely can be influenced, because they don't have a human soul. They don't have any protection. So, they can have demonic influences. I think, they always seem to come with the hitchhiker effect. It's, that's the phrase now. I used to say they follow you home, and now I
Right.
think Dave, Dave's using that phrase. It's the hitchhiker effect. In other words, you go out looking for Sasquatch, and not only could the Sasquatch follow you back home, but then these other paranormal things. And some of the paranormal things that were happening to me were definitely demonic. I mean, I had things going on in my house, like shadowed people
Uh,
and that sort of thing, UFOs, the orbs. So it was more than just a whole lot of crazy paranormal stuff started happening. And so you have to be careful. You can,
yeah.
you can get these hitchhikers, and these things are associated with long. I'm not saying I'm talking like 6, 7, 8 year, if you're into it for that long and really, really going after it.
So when people write to you, call you or write to you, I guess usually write to you and say, well, I've got this Sasquatch in my, that shows up on my farm or my yard and it's scaring me. I mean, what would you tell people?
No, and actually, it's in the book. What I actually do, I do what I call a practical and spiritual. Those not everybody is open or accepting of the spiritual side of it. So I have a set that we've just learned over the years work through my personal experience or other people that have written in or I've talked to. And so on the practical side, immediately, it's like you got to get the motion sensor lights up. You need to get the trail cameras out. Those two, they're very sensitive to the infrared and the passive infrared sensors, and they don't like the light. And so you get the motion sensor lights going. You get the trail cameras. You also another thing that we found is those holiday lights. That like you get, and they'll throw a pattern on the side of your house. Well, those are just spectacular. Like if you've got an issue where you're in a rural area and you got kind of a bigger area to cover, those things are very inexpensive. You can put 2 or 3 out and actually project them onto the foliage behind your house. And we found the Sasquatch will not cross that. They just won't, they will not come across that type of lighting. And of course, a couple of people said they think it's, if they quote, and that's another reason why I think they could be Nephilim, is because of their ability to cloak and go invisible. But they won't. That type of lighting would show up in it. And so you have that practical, and then on the spiritual side, I go over what's called rebuking, and you should pray and you should ask in the name of Jesus through faith to get them off your property, to set a boundary and forbid them from coming on your property. And so, and I'm just going to be honest, that worked for me when I was having all that. That was what I guess that's what I was going to, is why I put this in the spiritual side, is that's what worked for me. In other words, you think about it, you've got a 1,200-pound, 12-foot creature to pop your head off. And like if a lion's getting ready to eat you and you rebuke a lion, he's still going to eat you. Okay? Doesn't work on, but yeah. For me and many others, when I applied that spiritual principle, it worked. They stay back, and they still stay back. And Randy Bisson's had an instance. I'll tell you real quick, because I was talking to Randy, and I'd ask him. I said, we're talking about the spiritual aspect. Of course, he's Native American, and so they believe that they're definitely they're a being that's spiritual, that goes into both worlds, physical and spiritual. And he just right up front, he said, I'm not a Christian, but I'm a spiritual person. And he said, I have a real good friend that is a Christian. And he said, we were, doing our thing. We were researching, and we got surrounded by 2 or 3 of them. And they kind of caught us they kind of hemmed them in. And he said, they were coming down the hillside. We could see them. They were openly coming to us. He said that, and we were afraid for our lives. He said they were coming to tear us apart.
And was this up in British Columbia?
Yeah, I think Randy, Dave's gone up there and done some outings with Randy. And he
Yeah.
just told me straight up. He said, my friend just bowed his head and said, Jesus, please help us. Jesus, we need your help. And he said at that instant, there were all of them in large flashes of light and like a clap of thunder, just bam, bam, bam. And they just disappeared.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, what do you do with that? So,
Yeah. I don't know.
I know, but that for me, that put it over the, the rebuking working and that happening, put it over the top for me, that there's a spiritual aspect for this. And of course, in my worldview, that spiritual, the Nephilim, based on their description in the Bible and having some, inheriting angelic abilities and using them, it fit for me. And that's what I'm saying. I ain't got time to explain it, but in the book, I make that case in the book, in a more orderly fashion than my rambling tonight.
Well, you mentioned about the motion lights, and I heard of a case where they had been coming on this property, and so it could have been one of your cases, I don't know, but they installed motion lights around the house, and they went away on a vacation or something. They came back, and they found these sticks in the yard all around the house, and they finally figured out that the sticks were put where the motion light came on. So they knew, the Sasquatch knew right past that stick, the light's going to come on. So then they would wander around outside those sticks because they knew that was where their limit was. I mean, I thought that's really intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah. I've actually had them at my house here. They actually, one of them took its finger because, you got the lights, and then below it, I had that type of light that had that, the sensor underneath the light. And he got up underneath it and took his finger and just went bam, poked the end of it out. I've still got it.
Really?
A picture of it. It's perfect. It's like just poked it right out and broke it. So yeah. So they were and like I said, I think they can definitely see in the infrared spectrum. And so
no, it seems so because it seems that they can see the cameras. They know where they're pointing, and they won't get in front of them. And hey, I wanted to before we end, this has been awesome. I wanted to ask you that I think you've had some association or some encounter with Janice Carter from Tennessee.
Yeah.
And I don't know if everyone knows. Tell us who Janice is and why she is known. What kind of their story a little bit.
Sure. So Janice, and you can't mention Janice without Mary Green. Mary Green was a researcher who met and got together with Janice Carter, and together they collaborated and wrote the book 50 Years with Bigfoot, a Tennessee Chronicles. But Janice basically, and it's about 30 miles south of where I live, in a little town called Madisonville. Her great grandfather owned a farm, and he befriended a Sasquatch. Basically, the story starts as in sometime in the 30s on his farm, he was clearing timber, cut a tree down, and this Sasquatch, as an infant, kind of was messing around and was watching him, but got caught up under the tree. And of course, he kind
of injured it, if I remember.
He got mildly injured, and the parents weren't around. And at first, the guy's name's Carter. Mr. Carter, he actually worked at Alcoa aluminum plant here and then did farming. And he thought at first it was some sort of, retarded child, because of the way it looked and hair covered and in the wild. And he literally called around and said, has anybody lost a retarded child?
Anybody know of a lost child? Yeah.
Yeah, a lost child, retarded, maybe special needs. Of course, everybody said no. Of course, they bandaged it up. They tried to keep it in the house, and it was too wild. And, it was tearing everything up. So he took it out to the barn and put it in the barn, put it in and then locked the barn. Well, the next night, the mom and dad came, and they literally tore the door off the front of the barn to get to. And he ran out when they did that, and he got out there in time to see them carrying the Sasquatch off. And so, but it made such an impression on the Sasquatch when he became a young adult. He came back and began, and literally a relationship, began to form, and then, budded into a lifelong friendship. I mean, to the point where Janice, claims that at the end of his life, they were telling each other they loved each other.
Hmm.
And so Mr. Carter, basically he learned their language, which was a mixture of Cheyenne and Arapaho, I think Cherokees, all, it's kind of mixed in there. And so basically Janice as a child would watch all this. And she would sit up in a tree and she would take notes and she would watch them. And the book kind of chronicles that. And one of the very interesting things, and the Bigfoot's name was Fox. He was black, and then he turned later in life. He turned almost a gray color. But one of the
they
things,
age like we do, basically get gray.
yeah, 70, 80 years. Yeah, Mr. Carter fed them nightly, and there was Fox. Sheba was his mate, and then they had different children, and then there were other members of the, they kind of live in a clan grouping. In other words, you'd have a family group, and then but they wouldn't live with usually the family groups was loosely connected, and so sometimes they'd see other family members, sometimes they wouldn't. There'd be the transients go through and that sort of thing, and it was just a chronicling of all the different things that happened throughout that 50 years. But I wanted to say the thing that put it over the top for Mary Green, who was at the time was well-respected researcher from Middle Tennessee. Janice told her that unfortunately the Carters, they lived in a situation when where after the father died, where they let the farmhouse go down, and they just put a trailer over, would put trailers on the property and live in the trailers, and so the house had gotten unlivable. But Janice had said that for years she kept a notebook, spiral ring notebook, and anytime she'd hear the Sasquatch mention a word that she didn't know, that she would ask her grandfather, okay, they said this word, what does it mean? What is it? And she said, I know that book is in an old steamer trunk in the attic of that house. And she said, well, if we can get in there and get it, I promise you it's in there. Well, and so Mary Green said that she literally crawled into that house. It was, ready to fall down. And she got up in the rafters and got up in what was the attic. And sure enough, she found that trunk. And she's the one that opened it and found it. She said, there's no way Janice snuck in there and snuck this book in there. And she said, you could tell it was aged. I mean, there were several years, by the writing and how the writing improved. And so.
And it was like a Sasquatch English dictionary kind of.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And so she took that and most of the words were Cheyenne. And so she got she called, it was Montana, or it's either Montana or Wyoming. She got one of those universities, where they had Indian studies, and talked to the lady about the Cheyenne, and she would fax her the pages, and she said, "Is this right? Are these words right?" And the lady come back and she said, "Yes, they are. They're perfect." Oh. She said every Cheyenne word you have in here has the proper English translation. She said, "This is Cheyenne, and this is the right translation." And so for her, that was the proof in the pudding. She said, there's no way you could fake that. There's no, right. I mean, Janice was 9, 10, 11, 12 into her early teens making this notebook up.
Do you know if that notebook is out there, or is it published, or?
It's not published in the book. Where I put the book, me, I've got stuff everywhere. I've got the book around here. Like I said.
Is that book in print anymore? I don't think it is.
No, it's not in print. And hang on, what did I do? I had it.
But it's called 50 Years with Bigfoot. If you go on YouTube, they have a narrated.
Read.
You can listen to it.
Yeah, you can listen to it. The lady read it. I don't know, figure out where I put it. I had it laying up here. When I do stuff like this, it drives me absolutely crazy.
Because was there some pictures in the book of her little notebook, kind of showing the different?
Yeah, there's some pictures she's got in that notebook. She's got about 3 or 4 pages. It's
Okay.
not the full notebook, but it's got 3 or 4 pages of the Cheyenne and then what they mean in English.
No, I never knew it was Cheyenne. I knew she had written down words and got the interpretation from her granddad. But that's amazing to me that it was actually a Native American language.
Yeah, well, I got to visit and talk to Mary Green. She had hairs I went and got Sasquatch hairs from her. They're in the study, and I drove up and we talked about it. And that's what she told me. She said when she was writing the book and all the stories were being told before she actually finally had a sighting of fox, but before then she was still on the fence. This girl just crazy and pulling my leg. And she said that for her, that was the moment she knew this girl was telling me the truth. That, because there was just no way she could fake that.
This question about when Mary and Janice were trying to photograph fox coming out, thinking he would come out of the basement if Janice went down in there.
Yeah.
And they, if I remember this correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary gave you that footage thinking there was nothing in it.
Yeah, and there was. And
what did you find in the footage?
I personally think that fox was in the ditch line. It sure does look like a gray figure in the. It's got the dark coat. What me and Dave call the coat bottle eyes. The raccoon deal. The big black sunken in eyes and
is that on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, that's on my YouTube channel.
Hey, before I forget, how can people find you? Where would they go to find the information you've got out there?
Oh gosh, the easiest way to do it is probably go to my YouTube channel, and it's if they just go to YouTube and search Scott Carpenter Bigfoot.
Scott Carpenter.
It'll come up. It'll come up. Google's pushed me down. Google has pushed me way down. I tell people just Google Scott Carpenter Bigfoot. It would be on the first page, but Google's pushed me back to page 3 and 4 now. Because I won't pay them, so they're not going to.
Yeah. Well, and when you get down that far, people don't usually go that far to look. So
yeah.
So YouTube is the best way to find you.
And you can Google's the Sasquatch Awareness Project.
Okay.
And that'll take them there, or any of the. If I've got like a website created for all the names of my books, so the Sasquatch Awareness Project, or Truth Denied, or the Nephilim Among Us, all those, a Google search should take you to the page. Just be patient, you'll see it in the first page or two.
Well, and I'm gonna work on pulling together this show that I talked about with everyone who had any involvement in the Genome Project, and see if we can pull that off. So,
well, I'd love it. I mean, because have that interaction and have them tell it themselves instead of
exactly
getting it through me.
No, it would be a great show, and I think we would have a lot of people checking in. So, well, thank you, Scott, for giving some time. I know it's Eastern time, your time, so it's later for you, but I really appreciate you being on. It means a lot to me.
Sure. I enjoyed it, and anytime, just holler at me. We'll do it again.
Okay, good deal. We will sign off, and we'll talk to you again in the future, maybe on that show.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks. Have a good night.
You too.